people need two things. They need fun, they need variety. They need to know that they have their security of what they're used to. So if we fulfill on these needs, then change isn't so painful. It's when we say, yeah, go off bagels and all the toast and all your favorite treats, like get rid of all of them, go on a diet, and you feel like you're in prison. That is enough to make anyone upset. Like they might last a few days before they're just wanting so hard to bust out of prison. And when they do bust out of prison, they typically binge. And that's why I'm like, okay, we got to get rid of the prison analogy altogether. We need to find tons of substitutions for you so that you're like, hey, you know what? This tastes just as good as the other one. Why not make the switch and live longer?
You're listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with your host, Michael Palmer. Listen each week as inspiring guests share their secrets of success to help you increase your confidence, work smarter, and build a business you love. This episode of The Successful Bookkeeper is brought to you by PureBookkeeping.com, the proven system to grow your bookkeeping business.
Welcome back to the Successful Bookkeeper podcast. I am your host, Michael Palmer, and today's show is going to be a great one. Our guest is a registered holistic nutritionist, best-selling author, and media personality who's helped thousands of people enjoy allergy-free food that tastes great and assist the body in the healing process. Julie Daniluk, welcome to the show.
Oh, it's so great to be here. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I love that you've built this great community that everyone can feel supported. It's such an important job.
Thank you. We're proud of the community as well. There are people out there helping small business owners, and we know that when we help small business owners, we begin to solve some of the world's greatest problems, society's greatest problems. So they're our heroes in a way, and so I'm excited to have you on the show to share about nutrition and how we can help them. Not only, when we think about nutrition or eating right, it's like, yeah, we got to do that to be healthy. But there's so many fringe benefits that come with being healthy and doing healthy things for our body, like productivity and energy and all these things that really help our listeners, I think, in their day-to-day business and lives and what they do. So before we get into all of that good stuff, tell us about you. Let our listener know about you and your journey into nutrition and how you ended up making this your calling.
Well, I ended up fascinated by nutrition very early because my mom took me off cane sugar and artificial dyes and artificial preservatives when I was really little because I had attention deficit disorder. And I also had a terrible issue with focus. So I had so much in the way of learning disabilities that my mom was like, what can I do to help my daughter? And she discovered the work of Dr. Feingold. So by taking me off all these artificial foods, I couldn't believe it. My grades went from D's to A's overnight, and I ended up having just such a wonderful awakening and could get a good night's sleep. I used to be an insomniac as a kid. So that was my first I was lit up by nutrition. And then I went to theater school to become an actor, and I really found a lot of my habits started to come up where I didn't have a lot of money. I didn't have a lot of time. And I found myself reading more about nutrition than Shakespeare because I found my health started to go down, and then went on a trip to Asia, and boom, that was like the worst decision because I ended up eating the wrong pad thai and nearly died of food poisoning. And so when I came home, I had to double up my efforts to heal. And thank goodness I had a huge amount of good nutrition training to draw from, and created my book, Meals That Heal Inflammation, as a way to heal my own gut. And then many people have read it and absolutely love Meals That Heal Inflammation because it not only addresses inflammation of the gut, but let's face it, when you heal the gut, you heal your joints, your muscles. So if someone's in chronic pain listening, know that when we move to the anti-inflammatory food choices, we see a huge improvement in the pain. And people really do get back to a productive life.
It's remarkable, really, when you think of the human body and what happens when you put certain things into it, and what can happen when you don't put certain things into it. I'm blown away by it. I'm really excited to hear some more about that. And just don't even so myself personally, in the last, well, it's going to be a year and a half about, I cut out, I don't fully cut it out, but sugar, right? So I used to have sugar in my coffee. I would eat desserts regularly. I mean, I didn't eat a lot of sugary stuff. Like I didn't eat a lot of drink soda or those sorts of things. But when I started looking at it, I actually was consuming a lot of sugar. So it's been about a year and a half of that. And the change immediately, the change was remarkable. Lost a ton of weight, which was probably inflammation and retention of water, that sort of thing. But I'm really curious, now that I've done that, it's like a step. When I took a step in a healthier direction, it led to other steps, and I did other things, and I investigated other things. I'm really curious for me personally, this episode, to know what might be part of making sure that my gut is healthy. Like you said, making sure my gut's healthy. What can we be putting into my body and our listeners' body that's going to make us so much more healthy?
Yes, totally. I think the big thing to keep in mind is exactly as you've done. Are we willing to cut back on a few of those foods that we know are inflammatory? There's 7 foods that we've identified that we know beyond a shadow of a doubt are causing inflammation. And not just physical inflammation, but neuroinflammation, brain inflammation. Because if we have more than 8 teaspoons of white refined sugar, our body actually, we know, creates more of these inflammatory markers called C-reactive protein. So there's a wonderful study showing that as long as we keep our sugar down, and remember, there's sugar hiding out in a lot of foods. So we have to watch the sauces. Things like ketchup is a big place where things hide out, and a lot of salad dressings and unfortunate, like conventional food has added sugar. So if we just avoid the added sugar and focus in on the whole natural produce items, then boom, we see a huge drop. Did you know that they say that there's more than a 50% increase in depression risk if you have a very high sugar diet? And in total contrast, if you have a high produce diet, you reduce your depression risk by 24%. So we could see as much as an 80% swing if we let go of the sugar and embrace a whole bunch of produce. So eating those 7 to 10 veggies really buffers our body because it gives back all those missing vitamins and minerals. Because how strange that sugar we think of as an empty calorie, but it's actually a robbing calorie. It's a thief because it needs to be metabolized. To use that empty calorie, you have to cough up your own B vitamins, cough up your own minerals that are normally with the sweetener but have been removed. And then you can spin that sugar through your mitochondria, through your ATP. To make ATP, we have to spin it through the Krebs cycle. And we forget that that takes massive amounts of B vitamins. And where do we get that? Produce. So by entering the produce more in your life and getting all your B vitamins, boom, we see a big lift in our mood. So people want to battle back depression and grief and a ton of aggressive or anxiety symptoms. We really want to make sure that those anti-inflammatory produce items are the highlight of every meal.
Wow. I will say myself, and I'll invite the listener potentially that they have this situation. When I started to look at nutrition, I looked at it in such a simple way. I don't know if it was my upbringing, that it was just like, you're going to put this stuff into, and yeah, maybe it makes you feel this way, or it's like almost not really realizing how it's impacting me. Like when you said it impacts us on a cellular level and our mitochondria and all these other things. To me, I was like, it was beyond me. Didn't even think about it. Was just not the way I was brought up. And now just hearing you speak about it, and also the journey of the last 18 months, it's like, wow, I had no idea how it was impacting my body. didn't have a clue. And I mean, for the most part, very healthy, all that good stuff. But yet there was this underlying unhealthiness that eventually there's going to be time to pay up for the way what I was being, and it wasn't extreme, but look, we all want to be healthy. We want to feel good. We want to be able to tackle the day and do the things, and we want to live long so that we can spend time with our family. Well, that's the whole point, right?
Yeah.
So I'm really curious. You talked about the 7 foods. I mean,
let's get into them.
We've hit sugar, and I'm like, well, like what are the others?
Sugar's at the top of the list.
That's
totally.
So sugar is the evil. My granny. I mean, this is the crazy thing. My granny used to tell me it's poison. I'm like, yeah, Granny, what do you know?
Right.
I like sweet cookies. Come on, Granny.
Yeah, but if we really listen to the diet of our ancestors, there was no refined sweeteners until about 200 years ago. So we existed for thousands and thousands of years on whole produce items. And the biggest sweet hit we could get was when we worked hard to invade a beehive and like get a little bit of honey, or we binged on berries in the berry season. But now we see berries as like the lowest sugar fruit you could ever eat. So it's interesting. Let's get into that list beyond sugar, which is number 1. Number 2 is white flour, because white flour becomes white sugar in your mouth. So there's virtually no difference between eating a piece of bread or having a bowl of pasta. It's extremely similar to having a bowl of white sugar, because they've now realized that there's about 2 teaspoons of refined sugar equivalent in every slice of bread. So that's where a lot of people, it's just in their blind spot, because we've been told, you can have many servings of carbohydrates throughout the day, but if you're not burning them off, that can be a problem. And also, are you becoming intolerant to the strains of wheat that are available? Like, I know that a lot of people have jumped on the gluten-free bandwagon, but in large part it's because gluten, like wheat and other glutinous grains, are not the same as they were in the past. Like just in the last 20 years, they've been altered to be a variety of wheat that is harder to digest. So it is important for us to just check, hey, if I take out the cookies, the bread, the croissants, the pasta, would I feel better? Or even just switching. I'm not asking people to get off of their convenience foods, because I know how important that is. I always make sure someone has a cookie, a muffin, a bread item. We just want to really look for recipes that have very low glycemic impact, meaning that they don't break down into sugars quickly. They don't elevate our personal blood sugar, because when we drive our blood sugar really high, then insulin has to come to the rescue. We pump out a ton of insulin from our beta cells in our pancreas, and eventually our cells get really tired and we are not able to have that good insulin sensitivity. We can't drive those sugars into the cell, and therefore they start to attack the outside of our cell, and that's where the inflammation comes from. So there's the mechanism as to why white sugar and white flour becomes inflammation, is because it actually damages the outside of our cells. And I find it hilarious what the name of that is. There's a name for it. When you have high sugar, high flour attacking, when it breaks down to glucose, and that glucose is attacking every cell of your body, then it's called advanced glycation end products. And what's funny is the acronym in the science world is AGE. So I like to say that sugar ages you on a cellular level.
Wow.
So it's so important for us to pull back on the white flour, white sugar, go for the lowest sugar, lowest real starchy products as possible. And that's why all my books, like Meals That Heal, Slimming Meals That Heal, and The Hot Detox, are jammed full of lower carb, delicious recipes that they burn very slowly, so you don't require that same pop of insulin in order to utilize them. They have carbs, but they're slow carbs, so that your system stays nice and happy.
And you said starchy, high starchy.
High starch, right? Like, so white potato, white rice, white bread, all of those, they may be low in sugar, but the starch in there will turn into sugar when it hits your mouth. So you make this amylase, which is a digestive enzyme that splits the starch into sugar in about 30 seconds of chewing. Amazing. So that's why some people are so addicted to bread, is because for them, it's their preferred form of sugar. They don't like the super sweet taste. They like the starchy taste, but they don't realize that they're making their own sugar in their mouth every time they eat that highly refined starch. So that's why it's so good to reach for the slow starches. So when you think of a slow starch, it would be like pumpkin, squash, sweet potato, something that has some starch, but there's so much fiber binding it that it just trickles into your system really nice and slow. And that's what we're gunning for.
Okay.
Yeah. So the next big one is potato chips and French fries. And I know that it's, of course, a very starchy carbohydrate, but why I'm concerned is that when you take that carbohydrate and you slice it thin and then you drop it into old frying oil at a very high temperature, you make this toxin called acrylamide, which is powerfully inflammatory. It's neurotoxic. It absolutely makes you feel awful. But so many people are addicted to French fries and potato chips. Like, it's like wrestling a drug addict sometimes to try to get people to break up with salty snacks like that. But the good news is you can have salty snacks. We just want to reduce the deep frying. So when possible, go baked. And then beyond that, if you can try it on, there's a lot of snacks that are now dehydrated at low temperatures instead of frying. And that allows you to have the crispiness and the saltiness that you crave without having these refined carbohydrates fried at a really high temperature that we know is harmful. Yeah.
Wow. And one of the things I've learned is that in the grocery store, often there are these alternatives that seem like promising, but then when the marketing that's around it and what it actually is not so. It actually isn't what they're claiming to be. Like, it's just more bad stuff. How do we know? I guess it's research, right? To know what in the grocery store is actually a green check or a red X.
Well, my big thing is just to go by nature, because where we break down is when man has created another chemical sugar substitute. And they said, hey, saccharin is the solution about 30 years ago. And then we're like, oh, shucks, it causes cancer. And then they went on and they created aspartame. Oh, aspartame's the solution. Well, no, actually, it causes metabolic syndrome and it causes, a lot of neurological problems, and it can even have certain people have epileptic seizures. No, maybe that's not a good idea. And then we move on to the latest one, which is sucralose. Hey, sucralose is the answer. Let's go for that. Oh, oops. We attached a chlorine molecule to a sugar molecule, and a whole bunch of good bacteria in people's guts are dying, and they're becoming more anxious and having more IBS symptoms. Shucks, that one isn't a good idea. So that's my problem, is when man thinks that we are better than nature, and they just keep trying to design these low carb solutions. So I say, hey, you know what? We have seen the natural solutions have virtually no side effects. Can we go back to the natural solution? So the ones that are really coming up in the news lately, which you may not have heard of, is monk fruit. Have you heard of monk fruit? It's amazing because it's 100% natural. It's been around Asia forever.
I've tried
monk fruit. Yeah, it tastes amazing. So monk fruit tastes fruity, so a lot of people adapt to it. Doesn't have like the aftertaste. Like, I love stevia, but stevia needs to be put into something sour because it does have a tiny bit of a licorice aftertaste. And being raised in North America, we didn't really get that licorice note. So in Europe, people take to that and they're like totally gung ho for it. But here, just hide it behind lemon or hide it behind cranberry. So I make stevia sweetened lemonade, which is calorie free. It's really lovely. But with monk fruit being so fruity, you can put it anywhere and it tastes great. And there's virtually no calories to it because it's 200 to 400 times sweeter than sugar. So even though it's extracted from a fruit and it's completely natural, it actually is low carb by nature because you need so little of it to trick your tongue into thinking that it's had something sweet, but it hasn't had anything in the way of a heavy carb. So you get your sweetness kind of satisfied, but you're not elevating your insulin levels ridiculously high and causing all these health problems. So it's been a big solution for me lately. And for people who haven't found monk fruit yet, at least just making the switch from white sugar to raw honey is an amazing tool because raw honey actually has tremendous benefit. It helps to nurture the right microbiome. It kills off yeast in your system. A lot of people have excessive yeast overgrowth. So I at least say, hey, there was even a study done with rats that I thought was really interesting. They had all these baby rats and they fed half the group sugar water and half the group honey water their entire lifespan. And at the end of their life, the sugar group were running around the maze, bumping into things, not able to figure out how to get through the maze. They totally lost their memory. They were suffering from dementia. And when they tested their blood, they had a lot of stress hormones. That cortisol was super, super high. And then with the honey group, not only were they able to find their way through the maze and totally have good memory because it didn't hurt them nearly the same way as sugar, but they also tested their blood and their anxiety was really low. Their stress hormones were kept really, really low. So just that simple switch, I mean, who couldn't just grab a nice raw pot of honey? Like it's a total easy solution that's even in a regular grocery store. You don't have to find your way to a health food store for that one.
That is a simple move, and honey's delicious.
Yeah, totally, right? It's 20% sweeter than sugar. So you can even have less of it and have, that sweet tooth really satisfied.
Beautiful. So we've hit on, I think, 3 of the worst offenders.
Yes,
and we've been dropping in some. We've been dropping in a few of the goodies. So I love the honey one, and monk fruit as well. I tried it, and it was it was a little sweet, and so it was one of those things that I didn't take to, but it's like 200. You said 200 to 300 times more sweet. So there you go.
Yeah. So you probably had way too much of it. So if you just try it in your next. A really great solution is to try 100% pure cranberry juice and sweeten a cranberry soda or something like that, where it's like a safe test where you'd be like, whoa, yeah, that really works when you have used just the right amount, because too much sweet and your body goes, what? But the right amount, it's awesome. So the next big one I want to bring up is cola and other pops, because cola actually has this caramel coloring in it that has very negative cancer-causing agents in it, which people don't realize. When they think caramel coloring, they're like, awesome. All they did was take sugar and caramelize it at high temperature to create that beautiful color. But they don't realize that actually it has really negative. They're making it with ammonia and sulfites under high pressure and temperatures, and they're creating these very long chemicals. Methyl, my goodness, it's like methyl imdazoyl. I can barely pronounce them, but these chemicals are very disconcerting. And now governments have conducted studies showing that it can cause lung, liver, and thyroid cancer and leukemia in rats. So I really encourage people, if they are going to have a carbonized beverage, that they go with natural colorings. That's really important. And thank goodness there's so many pop brands on the market that are moving to natural colors. There's stevia sweetened pop now that you can get off all the sugar. And it's just so lovely to see that even the standard to be unnamed pop brands have put out their own natural versions. There's a lot of them that have the tagline 0 at the end. Those ones will often use fruit colorings, or they'll use actually beet is a really great place to get red dye from naturally. And then they'll use either stevia or erythritol, which is an actual sugar alcohol that's very low on the glycemic index. And that's been helping people break up with standard pop, because pop can be a bit problematic.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Crazy when you think about what goes into these products, and it's like a mad scientist making these concoctions that if you saw it being made, you wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole, but yet it's like, buy another flat of that. It's great.
Yeah. I think this next one might surprise you because it's being sold as a health food. So it really upsets me that people think they're doing themselves good. And that's microwave popcorn. So many people reach for it because, hey, it's low fat and it's a really healthy snack because it's full of fiber. But it turns out that the artificial butter flavoring that's put on microwave popcorn is very unhealthy. And actually, one of the most dangerous things you can do is to take the microwave popcorn out of the microwave and pull the bag open and breathe in super deeply. Because that actually, the act of breathing in artificial butter flavoring, there's a major lawsuit that's gone down in the States because the people who were in charge of manufacturing the actual butter flavoring, it was terribly impacting the workers who made it. So the whole bunch of workers there ended up doing a lawsuit as a group because they were getting so sick, and yet it hasn't been taken out of the food stream. And there should be a warning on the side of the bag that basically says, like, please don't inhale deeply, because people love the smell of microwave popcorn, but between the genetically modified canola oil and also the butter flavoring on the microwave popcorn, it's a real problem. So I encourage people to go back to organic popping corn made in an air popper, and then you can put a healthy oil on top of it that tastes great. And if you want that butter flavor that's really addictive, using nutritional yeast will pop a dramatic amount of B vitamins onto your popcorn and make it taste absolutely delicious.
Wow. Remarkable.
Yeah, and I hope it's okay that I normally don't go this deep into this area, so I appreciate the chance to say something different, because when you go on interviews, sometimes you get a sound bite, and that's what's so great about having a podcast is to actually be able to get into the minutia of some of this stuff and help people understand why they want to let it go. Because if they know why, then they have a much higher chance of having willpower when it comes time to make a choice.
We might have to make this a public service announcement for, here you currently, you may be poisoning yourself, literally. Do not do this. So this is valuable. So keep going. I love it.
Oh, cool. Well, the next one would be artificially dyed candy. And this one's so funny because how many times do you see on Halloween, Christmas, Easter? It's like every 3 months we give kids this huge whack of artificial dye. And artificial dye is actually created from coal tar derivatives. So let's just know that it's a petroleum byproduct that causes terrible neuroinflammation. So that's why my mother figured this out when I was 7. She read this book by Dr. Feingold, and when she realized how toxic dye was, she actually got me off of red dye, blue dye, yellow dye. And that's what made the biggest difference. And I really encourage you to just try to get off 2 dyes in particular. All the red dye that you see in candy, and yellow dye is actually also known as tartrazine. And that can cause terrible issues with learning and attention span and aggression. So when we take it out of a children's diet, you'll notice their moods are more level, they can sleep better, they can study better, and they can also really have better word comprehension. Like, you're going to see a real jump, as my mom did with me, like literally just escalate and just feel so much better. And the good news is there's so much fun candy that's hitting the market that uses carrot for the orange, that uses beets for the red, that uses cabbage for the purple. Like, we are seeing these amazing companies doing the right thing. So I just say, hey, I'm not saying kids don't deserve candy. I know that kids want to have fun, and so do adults, but we can just shop even at a regular grocery store. Just look for the no artificial dyes added, which is often a big marketing push that they're putting on the packaging, just so that kids can be safe. And also people who are having neurological problems as an adult. I mean, how many times, I'm sure, as a person who's crunching numbers all day long, do people sit there and munch on chocolate that's covered in lots of dye, or munches, we fall into wanting gummy bears and those kind of sweet treats. And just that simple switch would be a really healthy and easy thing to do.
I love it. And I think it's for many, it's going to be not a rude awakening, a pleasant awakening, the impact that some of these things are having on their lives, and some choices that they've made that they think were smart choices. It's like, whoop, gotcha, like diet soda, right? It's like, hey, this is healthy. I'm drinking a healthy drink. And it's like, whoops, you got the aspartame and you got the caramelization, sulfur, blah, 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 blah. And it's still garbage. So, but there's solutions, which you're alluding to some of the solutions, which is great.
Yeah, exactly. As long as I give you something fun, because people need two things. They need fun. They need variety. They need to know that they have their security of what they're used to. So if we fulfill on these needs, then change isn't so painful. It's when we say, go off bagels and all the toast and all your favorite treats, like get rid of all of them, go on a diet, and you feel like you're in prison. That is enough to make anyone upset. Like they might last a few days before they're just wanting so hard to bust out of prison. And when they do bust out of prison, they typically binge. And that's why I'm like, okay, we got to get rid of the prison analogy altogether. We need to find tons of substitutions for you so that you're like, hey, you know what? This tastes just as good as the other one. Why not make the switch and live longer and have like a lot of happy moments in between, right? Like have a better experience. Because I have to say, I gave up refined sugar about 15 years ago. And I cannot believe the difference. When I accidentally get poisoned, say in a restaurant, I can tell within a couple hours. I'm like, whoa, what just happened? And I'll call the restaurant. I'm like, that sauce that you gave me, does that have sugar in it? Can you read that? And they'll go back and they'll read it and they'll say, oh, no, there's no sugar. And then they'll read me like glucose syrup and dextrose and modifying corn syrup. And I'm like, oh, I guess you didn't understand all the versions of sugar. So I have to say that, wow, there's been a big movement afoot for people to have full disclosure on restaurant menus. It's happening in Europe, and I can't wait for it to come to North America. Won't it be great when you can look at a menu and go, oh, wow, okay, I can eat that? Because just like when you buy food in a store, there's full ingredient disclosure. I think it's going to be great.
Well, I echo that, and I'm thinking as I listen to that, I'm thinking, our audience probably, they're busy people, but yet they pay a lot of attention to the details, and so which is a strength. And the strength, I think, armed with the right information, if this hasn't been a focus, it's like, hey, start to collect some data on what will make you feel better, what will give you longevity, what will help you be better in your work and in your life and with your family. And then you'll be paying attention to that, and that will create new outcomes for your life. Let's talk a little bit about some of the things that we can, hey, if you're not eating this, you need to be, and it's going to lead to a better day if you just got more of this in your body.
Absolutely. So focusing on the positive. Now the whole rest of the podcast can be all the healthy solutions, right? We got all that negative stuff out of the way. So one of the superheroes in the world is avocados. They are the first food of children in the Caribbean for good reason, because they are so high in nutrition. So you're getting everything from vitamin A through to some zinc. It's so good for you. And avocados increase something called glutathione pathways in your body, which is incredible for liver detoxifying, for boosting and stabilizing your immune system. It elevates your mood. It's also just recently, because I keep up on the journals, was super excited to see that an avocado dramatically reduces your appetite. So because it's so rich in fat and B vitamins, you feel so satiated after eating half an avocado that you'll eat less of other negative foods. So definitely use the avocado to outcrowd things. And I make a great key lime smoothie. I make a great key lime pie. And the secret ingredient is avocados. And also I make a great chocolate pudding because the avocado substitutes any sort of need for cream. And wow, just so delicious. Like, who doesn't love avocado? It's one of the most loved foods, right? Absolutely great. Next one, which will really help all those people who have major number crunching to do, is sustainable fish, because we want to have that high essential fatty acids. We want to have as much omega-3 as possible because it's so anti-inflammatory. It works like non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. It actually works like an NSAID. So for those of you who are dealing with pain and inflammation, you want to reach for more herring and sardines and mackerel and all those tiny little fish that are super sustainable, grow really quickly so they're not harmful to eat, because a lot of people are worried about the oceans and heavy metals, but those are very safe fish to eat. And it's also ridiculously high in this omega-3, which boosts your serotonin. So it helps to battle back sadness and really helps you feel really good. And of course, fish is one of the number one natural occurring sources of vitamin D. So sustainable fish is great for seasonal affective disorder because of that vitamin D. Vitamin D is important to make sure that we have a good circadian rhythm and that we're able to make enough serotonin to keep the depression at bay, which is great. Now, moving on to a really fun food is mushrooms from Asia, whether it be shiitake mushrooms, maitake mushrooms, all those beautiful mushrooms that you see in the exotic food section of your store. You can have them dried, you can have them fresh, but those really good wood mushrooms are exceptionally high in something called polyphenols that help to protect your liver and help to really battle back your appetite. So it's wonderful for slimming down. It's wonderful for protecting your heart, for balancing your immune system as well. And for those of you who have tax season coming and need real focus, know that there's a special mushroom called lion's mane mushroom that's being studied for being a nootropic. It's called a nootropic because it actually helps to fuel the brain with extra energy so that it can really focus and have exceptional memory. So if you're really feeling crunched, then lion's mane tea is extremely popular. It's delicious. It's easy to find in the health food store. Just look for it powdered. And you just add a sachet to water and enjoy. So that's been a big one for sure.
Oh, boy.
A neat one from Italy is artichokes. Artichokes are so good for you. They're great. Artichokes are a great weight loss food because of their exceptionally high fiber content. And did you know that if you avoid eating a lot of sugar and starch, the artichokes will actually help you make more ketone bodies? And you may have heard of the ketogenic diet. Well, ketone bodies actually help to fuel your brain and help you feel fantastic. So a lot of people have been enjoying more asparagus and more artichokes. But the last thing about artichokes may surprise you. It heals the stomach lining, reducing ulcers, and helps to perceive other things as sweet. It changes your taste buds so that anything you eat 30 minutes after eating artichokes will taste sweeter. So if you take a sip of water right after eating some lovely artichokes from a jar, like a lot of people just buy jarred artichoke hearts, then you'll notice that your water tastes insanely sweet, which is kind of cool. Yeah. And of course, if we're in Italy, we can't really move much farther than talking about garlic, because garlic is ridiculously good for you. It's a strong antibiotic, antifungal, so it's really good for balancing your microbiome, and also fantastic for reducing cholesterol and just overall fights inflammation. So that's probably why the Italians, places like Sardinia, they're living the longest of all the people on the planet because of their amazing laid-back lifestyle, their high produce, a little bit of wine, and some good amount of garlic, and they're off to the races. That's one thing that'd be really fun to talk about, is where the one thing that links all the long living people. So that you've heard of the blue zones, probably. The longest living people are from Sardinia, Italy. They're from Greece. They're from Okinawa, Japan. They're from the west coast of the States, and they're from Costa Rica. There's 5 of these blue zones of the longest living people, and they all have one thing in common. They're lucky enough to live close to a coastline where they're getting a lot of fish, a lot of fresh fish, and that's very, very high in that omega-3. And then they have a very strongly plant-based diet, even though they have a little bit of omega-3 rich free-range meats and stuff, and they do have lots of fish. They really have a huge focus on vegetation. So if we really remember that we want to have lots of dark leafy greens. Like one of my favorites is arugula, or having spinach, or having something that we know has that extra power of nutrition. That one's just great. It really helps to knock back that inflammation and give you these special phytochemicals that will help your liver really purge a lot of toxins, for sure.
Wow. You know, I have the things I did, the bulletproof coffee.
Oh, nice.
So
yeah.
I'm curious what your take is on that. It's been about same time I cut out sugar. I started like March 1st, 2018. But in the last couple of months, I'm noticing just some things where I'm thinking either I'm like low on vitamin D or I'm not getting enough of something, right? It just feels like I've actually lost a bit more weight and a bit of insomnia. And so this has been great for me to listen and think, you know what, I think there's just more fresh fish, more vegetables, and some of the other things that you mentioned. I took a bunch of notes. I think will be helpful. But what's your take on the bulletproof diet?
What's so interesting that you spoke to the insomnia, because that's my only thing, is I love the idea of helping to push your intermittent fasting. So a lot of people will break their fast through the night because you fast for 8 hours minimum, and they'll be able to extend their fast slightly by having this fat in coffee, right? So they've broken their fast officially because you obviously have had something, but nothing that spiked your insulin. So you've been able, that's probably why you've had such a great weight loss, right? Yeah. My only issue with bulletproof coffee is we have to keep in mind that it is 1/4 of a cup of fat, which not everyone digests well. So there may be some digestive issues that start to crop up because you're having 2 tablespoons of butter and 2 tablespoons of coconut oil. Yeah. It's a lot of saturated fat. So some people who follow this regime will notice that the next time they have their cholesterol checked, their doctor's like, what the heck? Because they've had so much butter. So I always say, like, could we kind of cut back the butter a little bit and have like 1 tablespoon instead of 2 and 2? And could you switch it up so that you don't have coffee on your days off? And that would rest your adrenals. And you might notice that you have an excellent sleep the nights that you skip the coffee. And if you love the flavor, then you could do organic, fair trade, uncaffeinated coffee if you are just doing it for the flavor. But if you're doing it for the buzz and you're doing it for the energy, then switching it up and having other sources of energy is also a really good idea. So I like, if we look at green tea, it has 1/3 the caffeine of coffee. So doing like a matcha latte, having if you want a total day off and you want to see, like, what is my energy really like when I'm not pushing my adrenals hard, then having like a turmeric latte on your total day off where you can just lounge around and like read a book and like totally rest, you'll notice you'll sleep way better because you just don't have the caffeine in your system. So I'm worried that caffeine might be messing with your sleep, because we forget that the half-life on coffee is 12 hours. The half-life on coffee is 4 hours. So the full effectiveness of coffee is 8 to 12 hours, depending on how fast you metabolize caffeine. That's a big deal. So if you're having a coffee at 2, there's no hope in heck you can get to sleep at 10. Like your body just won't let you rest.
I did totally cut out caffeinated anything after. I just do the 1 in the morning.
Nice.
And I was actually, because of the butter and the other stuff you put in it, like I really like a bold red wine or a dark coffee, dark chocolate. So I was putting way more coffee in there. So I was actually, it was like, because I self-grind it and put it in an AeroPress. And so it was like, I've actually started to dial that back too. And so, but I haven't been taking breaks. I've done bulletproof coffee every single day for 18 months. So maybe I need to like cut out once or twice a week and have something else, like maybe an Earl Grey or something like that, even decaffeinated. It's good advice.
Yeah, definitely. It definitely helps. And also consider, if you need more energy authentically, what kind of adaptogens could you be using? Like, is there Siberian ginseng or ashwagandha or one of these herbs that give you energy without stimulating your adrenals. So it's kind of authentic energy instead of like that spiky energy that a lot of people live on. Like, hey, for this podcast, sure, I'll have, a little bit of espresso or something to have my mouth work better. But when you're not on and you can sort of just work at a human pace, then those other adaptogens are healthier than stimulating constantly. And if you need a little help to get to sleep, pumpkin seeds as your last snack or cherries are both things that really do help with authentic melatonin expression. Interestingly enough, pumpkin seeds are high in tryptophan, which expresses to tryptophan is the building block of melatonin, your sleep hormone. And then cherries actually help to transport the tryptophan to the brain so you have much better sleep. And funnily enough, cherries also have a naturally occurring melatonin. So one of the last snacks that I'll have if I have a stressful day is like a small bowl of coconut yogurt topped with pumpkin seeds and a couple cherries. And that just tastes ridiculously good and also helps me sleep deeper. So that's fun.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
This has been incredibly interesting and daunting and as well exciting about my personal, the things that I'm putting in my body and some great ideas to go and try and experiment with to bringing into my diet to make me feel healthier, to give me energy. And I really, on behalf of our audience, want to thank you, first of all, for that. Before I let you go, though, I would love to get some fast action ways to get more information from you about doing this. You've got a bunch of books, you've got recipes. I mean, this episode could probably go on for hours, and you've got so much knowledge. What is a great way, a stepping stone for our listener to take into transforming a new era for their life and nutrition with you? What would that look like?
Well, I have a lovely masterclass coming up where I'm teaching people how to cleanse with food. And it's just a fun, easy 4-part masterclass. So if you want to jump on that, we can provide them a link. That would be really fun. And I do, of course, work with clients by having programs that I run for 21 days up to 100 days, depending on how deep you want to go. We have these lovely programs that I'm very happy to have links provided. And of course, on social media, I am constantly sharing the latest studies because I wake up in the morning. Some people read the paper. I read the nutrition journals. Like, I love it. So I'm always posting the coolest, latest facts on there. So if you go to Julie Daniluk on Instagram or on Facebook, that's often where people will find me. And we run these really cool Facebook Live shows called Meals That Heal TV, where you can actually ask me live questions and find out really cool information along the way. So I do hope that people jump on the opportunity to be in the masterclass. And if you ever subscribe to my newsletter, you get actually 5 cooking classes for free. And you also get a ton of cool recipes that I mail out, one every week. So you're not overwhelmed, but you get to try on new delicious foods that are coming down from the TV segments that I do.
Wonderful. All sorts of valuable resources to take this on. And I challenge you, the listener, do something new. If it inspires you, take something, one thing, change it up in your diet as per the long list that we've created, and see what happens and see what vitality it brings to your life and the work that you do and your family, and let Julie be one of your mentors in that journey. And for those of you that do that, I'd love to hear about it. Share on the Successful Bookkeeper group and Facebook what you're taking on in terms of your nutrition and what's the outcome. If you've done something where it really has impacted you, share it with the rest of the community. Let them know the impact that it's having on your life. And let's make this something that other people can get access to. And the healthier you are, the more we can enjoy the life and business that we're building. So, Julie, thank you so much for being on the show today. This was awesome.
Thank you.
I learned a ton, and I know our listener did as well.
Cool.
And with that, we wrap another episode of the Successful Bookkeeper podcast. To learn more about today's guest and to get access to all sorts of valuable free business building resources, you can go to thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Until next time, goodbye.
You've been listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with Michael Palmer. For more information and to download the resources mentioned in this episode, please visit us at thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Thank you for listening.